almost evening, right? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to project-based learning. Yes, that's what we need. Excitement after a really long day, right? And your day is not quite over, but I can promise you that my day is longer than yours because I have a 7.5-hour drive home to Harrisburg after I leave here. I know. So we're going to start on our first journey here into project-based learning, and to get us started, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about me. Obviously, I am from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Don't hold it against me that I'm originally from Pittsburgh. Right? Okay. I have spent the last 16 years in education. 14 of those years were in the classroom. I taught every social studies that you can think of. 9th grade, not my best year. All the way up through seniors, I taught everything from co-taught classes to AP courses and all the kiddos in between, and I've done project-based learning with all of them. I am also a mother of a 6-year-old and a 10-year-old, so I get to spend a lot of time in 1st grade and in 5th grade right now, as well as traveling around the country and soon to China here in 2 weeks to work with teachers. And the really great thing about what I do right now is that I get to meet educators from all across the globe and hear about the wonderful things that they're doing. I get to hang out in their classrooms, I get to learn from them, and I get to work with adults now instead of students in my own classroom, and there are days when I miss that, but this is certainly just as fulfilling. And I wrote a book a 1.5 years ago on authentic learning experiences, a real-world approach to project-based learning. So today we're going to start you on that journey with project-based learning. We're going to continue that journey in a couple of weeks, and we'll be back in December, and I believe back in April, to talk more and more about project-based learning. But in this book, what I decided to do was to take a look at all the wonderful things that people were doing across the country, from kindergarten on up, from Title I schools, rural schools, charter schools, inner city and urban schools, middle of nowhere schools, and hear about the things that they were doing in their classrooms and what was working for them and their students, and sharing those stories. So we'll share some of those stories over the coming months while we work together in some of the online work that we do as well. And I am fortunate enough not to be alone today, but I do get some help.
So I'm Debbie Liberi, and I think I have talked to almost everybody in the room. I am a former Cincinnati public school teacher, so I spent many hours sitting where you are, and I am very happy to be with you today. I am here because of the generosity that Dana has offered of her time. I get to piggyback on all of her expertise and the work that she's been doing with project-based learning, because I'm really here representing a grant that Cincinnati Public is involved in called the SEAMS grant, and it is a STEM grant, but it's based on challenge-based learning and engineering design process, which is really what project-based learning is about. So later on today, I'll talk to you more specifically about the SEAMS grant and how you can be a part of it, or how you can spread the word to your school. It is a huge, sizable grant from the National Science Foundation, and we are as Cincinnati Public School is involved with 5 other districts, or 5 districts altogether, and all of the Claremont County Consortium of districts, which is 14 of them. So it's a huge grant this way, but also it's a 5-year grant, and the cohorts are making a 2-year commitment. So I'll tell you more about that as time goes on, but really the body of the work today is really about project-based learning, and we have this expert in our midst, and I'm very grateful and happy that she was generous enough to offer me some time to piggyback on all of this. So thanks, Dana.
Well, and it's always exciting to work with someone else as well, because oftentimes just me, myself, and I, right? So I like to team teach because I used to do that in my own classroom. And to really get us to start thinking about what we're doing in our classroom, we're going to start off with a short little video here. 84,600 seconds is what we get every day. We're looking at, on average, what we have with students in an entire week in our classrooms, 126,000 seconds. So that breaks down to the time that a student is in school on average on a daily basis is 25,200 seconds. And you're looking at an average around 3,000 seconds that you have them in your possession, right? That you're keeping them, depending on how long your class period is. And the question is, how does your students actually spend those seconds when they're with you? So that's the question that we want to think about and that we want to ponder over the course of this evening and into the following sessions that we will have together. Because we certainly know that not all of our students come to us like this. Very excited about the content, and they're ready to learn, and they're eager to learn. We have a select few that are like that, but they're few and far between. And what we really want to do is we want to start to create students that are critical thinkers, problem solvers, that are creative, that we get them to those highest levels of the New Bloom's taxonomy, that they use their abilities to then translate into lifelong learners. And so we're going to talk about really how project-based learning can do that, and how the authenticity, relevancy, and complexity of the work that they do can really challenge them to become deeper learners of the content rather than just consumers of information where they memorize. And so to get us started in this journey, you all probably came in here today thinking that you were going to sit and listen to me talk and maybe take a few notes, but that's not going to be the case. We're going to put you through a mini project experience, so boy, we get to do some work, right? And I must say that this is mostly thanks to Debbie and part of her creation here, and I just kind of went along for the ride and tweaked some things. But as we start to think about, and before we get really into this mini project experience, to get us thinking about this mini project experience and to inspire us on this, we're going to watch one more video. So we have two juniors that have invented, created, and now are applying for patents. And so maybe if you want to grab the lights there.
Yeah.
We're going to give you a little challenge. We don't expect you to recreate the rapid packaging container, but we're going to give you a challenge in which we're talking about a homegrown Ohio company here, Home City Ice. And we know that in packaging products, we want to do it effectively and we want to do it efficiently. And we're going to have to transport these products. Cost, design, the arrival of the product in the same condition when it left the warehouse to when it arrives at the consumer is certainly something that we want to focus on. And it's especially true for any products that are perishable, those goods. So we know that Home City Ice is one of the nation's largest privately owned and most experienced manufacturers of packaged ice products. They've nearly perfected the ice making process, and you can even take a look at them online at Home City Ice and they will walk you through how that process works. It's pretty interesting. However, there is an issue. How many of you have ever gone to buy a bag of ice and it's all clumped together, right? So it doesn't matter how great it is when it leaves Home City Ice, there's an issue with once it leaves their cooling systems and then it actually gets to the consumer. So we're going to do a little challenge here because we want to make a potential difference in transporting the ice once the consumer purchases it. No more melted ice clumps in those plastic bags. Our question becomes, what is the most effective change we can design for an ice packaging system? That's our question, that's our focus. And if we have, what is the most effective change we can design for an ice packaging system as our design challenge? What do we need to know as participants here in order to successfully complete this challenge? To get you thinking about that, I'm going to give you an example. What materials are we allowed to use? That's going to get you thinking about it. So what I would like you to do individually now for about the next minute is to think on your own. If you have a computer where you want to type some things, if you want to take down some notes, I'm going to challenge you to come up with at least 3 different questions that you think you need to know in order to answer this overarching question: what's the most effective change we can design for an ice packaging system. So what do you need to know besides what materials are we allowed to use? Let's do it individually first before we do any sharing out. Take about another 20 seconds to think about what questions do we have, what do we need to know in order to answer our design challenge. When you're ready, if you would go ahead and share at your table groups what questions you have, and at your table groups, would you please pick your top question that you would like to share out with the entire group, and have a backup question or two as well, in case that one ends up being shared first. All right, what I would like to do now is we'll go table by table. If you could designate someone to share out what your top question was, we'll start with the top question and then we'll work backward, and we'll get a second round of questions as well. So why don't we go ahead and we'll start to my closest table over here. What question do you have that you would like to add that you would need to know in order to do this challenge?
This is a big one, and I think I assume what ask it, and I'd be asking the question is, what's wrong with the current transportation, the current packaging? What's wrong with current packaging?
That's an excellent question.
And then the other thing is probably information on weight and size of the amount of ice.
All right, so we're gonna stop with two, and then we'll share some other ones.
Okay, good.
Oh, okay. We wanted to know our budget. So we wanted to know like how much it was gonna be paid for, how we could make our profit if we change something, because if it costs a whole lot of money, there's no sense in doing it.
Okay, so we're focusing on the economics of it. What
Oh,
budget
we
do
are?
we have?
What you saying with our question?
Right.
Yeah.
No, it's
No, I meant that's what we were talking about.
right, with the budget and the profit as well.
Right.
How about over here?
They stole ours.
I know you have more than just what they have.
do.
We wanted to figure out how we can make it travel better. We felt like a lot of the issues that come out of the bags is, when you take it from point A to point B.
Storage.
And then also, how will it be stored?
In transport and that's where like
And we'll do this group back here.
We have what temperature is necessary to avoid the clumps.
Nobody said anything about temperature yet, so that's good.
It's below 32.
And did you have another one that you wanted to add as well?
Sorry. We also said, will the design travel across the U.S. or will it, will it be across the world or just United States?
Ooh, this sounds like a math fun. Raytown system. Oh.
And then last but not least,
A lot of ours we mentioned, but we talked about motor transportation as well, how quickly we use sunrise.
out of the ones that we have on here, are there any other ones that you had at your tables that you would like to add to the list?
That sounds travel.
So I'm hearing something about, can we do something that's environmentally friendly? Did you have one additional one?
I think we needed to know the dimensions of the ice, both the cubes and then the total amount. And then we also need to know the time involved from the ice, I'm sorry, the time from when it leaves the home city ice facility to get to the store-based storage facility.
We were wondering about the container at the destination, whether the temperature changes because everybody opens it all the time. We wanted one of those little slots that shoots it out. Big old bag, catch it. Maybe it'll hit the ground, then there won't be any clumps. You know how you do that? Bam.
So what we've done here is, in having a challenge, we've come up with a list of a whole list of inquiry questions. The things that we need to know in order to be able to successfully complete this challenge. And so as a teacher in the classroom, a couple of things that I would do with this list. First and foremost, I could use it as a pre-assessment tool to see if you understood some basic concepts. Maybe I went into this challenge assuming that you had some background information, and then once I see this list, I realize that you don't have that information, and now I'm gonna need to make sure that I fill in those gaps as needed. So I can use it as a pre-assessment tool. I can use it as a tool for planning so that I can scaffold for my students some of these lessons. Because one of the biggest mistakes that I personally made when I began my journey of project-based learning is I felt like I gave the students the challenge and then I stepped out of the challenge and I let them have at it. And I wasn't doing a whole lot of support and a whole lot of scaffolding for them. So we don't want to take the teacher out of the mix here, so I can use this to then create some scaffolded lessons for my students as well. This can then be used as a process of some formative assessment pieces throughout the entire process that we would spend on it, as I could go back and do some checks for understanding to ensure that my students know where they are at a certain juncture, and if I need to do some differentiation for some of my students. This becomes this living, breathing document that as we get involved in this challenge, students can then add to this list if they come up with, through this process, this design process and this inquiry process, that they come up with some more questions. Because that's what inquiry is all about, asking additional questions through that process. So it becomes that living and breathing document that we can continue to go back to. Now we're going to do a modified version of this We're not going to do the entire thing, but we want you to be aware of this design process because this is a huge component of that SEAMS grant. And with this design process, we have all of these different components where you would do some researching, you would do some brainstorming and sketching some designs, you would choose the best design, submit your design, have your materials. Work on the constraints that we have, test and calculate, redesign, retest and recalculate. So at this point, I'm going to let Debbie take over because this is her design process and her design challenge.
I'm going to just pass out a few, a couple of sheets here, but this one first, which is really kind of the steps that you'll be taking in actually conducting this challenge. And I'll talk about this with you for just a second, and then I'm going to let you have at it and see what you guys can come up with.
Do you have this on the board somewhere?
No, I do not. Actually, what is up there is really what is on here. It's just a little bit more concise version. What we want you to do is always do some research collectively. And you'll be working in groups today, and it looks like these are natural groups that you're sitting in. So this will work just fine. But you want to do some research. Research can be something very informal, like going to Google something and seeing what you come up with, or actually using some websites that are really good, that the teacher says you might want to check these out. Or it can be just very informal where you're picking each other's brain for what knowledge you have. So, but you do want to do a little research in this. You want to make sure that everybody has some input. You want to make sure that there is a plan and that you document the plan. So when you work with students and they say, oh, I've come up with something, no, you really want that something to be on paper so that you have something concrete that you are documenting the process. This is a process. So we are down at first things first, which is really number 3 on there. And it says to divide into 3 teams, and really we're just gonna, I think if we just stay with the teams that we're in, we'll be fine today. And you wanna do the following things in like a 10-minute period here. You wanna name your group, so come up with some kind of group name for yourselves. And you wanna define what the problem is. What is it that you're trying to do? Research the problem and figure some things out and brainstorm some possible solutions. So this is just kind of getting that creative process churning. And what we need right now is for you to know what you are going to do. If you go back up to number 1, is you're going to design a storage container that will minimize the melting of an ice cube over a 10-minute period. So we're kind of taking the bigger challenge that we talked about, making it a little bit smaller, and this is your little challenge for, we're probably going to be doing this for about an hour, for the next hour or so. Noah?
I just have a question.
Sure.
How do you determine what your main question is going to be? Am I ahead of?
You are jumping ahead. We're gonna have you experience it, and then we're gonna talk about that.
All right.
But that is an excellent question, and I promise you that we will get to that.
All right.
So